Welcome everyone. Today's lecture is on economic development of nation. This lecture is for international introduction to international business for international year 1 student. So let's start with the learning outcome for today's lecture is. In this lecture, we will explain the economic development and how it is measured and outline the various sources of political risk and explain how companies can manage political risk and describe the economic transition and the experiences of China and Russia. If you look on this, Paytm in India, this is one of the India's most popular app where 20 million business accept payment through Paytm and 300 million Indian use Paytm to shop online, in store, buy movie ticket, buy bills, send money to other, top up and their phone plan and more. What India has gained basically from this? India boasts an expanding middle class and a foundation of market economy, including thriving private enterprise, democratic government, and good accounting practices. India assessed economic development by using robust technology ecosystem that rooted deeply by using mobile phone penetration and low data fee and favorable government policies. And Paytm received a tremendous boost when India removed its two biggest denominations of paper currency from circulation. Most transactions occurred in cash at the time, and the two notes accounted for around 86% of cash in circulation. Many people simply switched to digital payments on their smartphone. So Paytm went from adding tens of thousands of customers a day to adding hundreds of thousands. Two approaches to economic development. So India's business history is one of the organic growth and homegrown startup in knowledge-based industry, including Infosys, Wipro, Tata Communication, and many others. So country have historically relied on strong manufacturing base to begin their economic development, like China, used its abundant supply of natural resources and inexpensive factory labor to fuel its economic development, while India focus on education in medicine, mathematics, and engineering turn out to be essential in today's knowledge-based world. Other factor aiding India economic development, including history of having a market economy, a legal system based on property rights, and private enterprise and functioning democracy. China, on the other hand, developed its economy and grew its homegrown business following a different approach. It used abundant supply of natural resources and inexpensive factory labor to fuel its economic development. China threw open its door to manufacturing investment and usually restricted foreigner to a minority stake in joint venture operations. Factory manager and local company gained knowledge of production process and technology used by their foreign partner. They soon began business of their own to help supply and growing worldwide demand for all sort of merchandise made in China. The fact that China followed top-down approach to develop while India, on the other hand, they pursue a bottom-up approach reflect their opposing political system. India has functioning democracy, and China that is ruled by Chinese Communist Party. Economic development, first we need to understand what does it mean. Basically, economic development that refer to an increase in economic well-being, quality of life, and general welfare of nation people. The concept incorporates both quantitative and qualitative features. So, economic growth, basically that depends on gains in productivity. So business increase its productivity through all form of entrepreneurial activity and innovation. Yet economic development require economic growth, which is quantifiable increase in goods and services that a society produce. So economic growth in turn depends on gains in productivity, which is simply the ratio of output, what is created, to input, that ratio from output to input. And what is output? Output means what is created, and input, that means resources used to create output. We can speak about the productivity of a business and industry or an entire economy. For a business to boost its productivity, it must increase the quantity of the output using the same amount of input, or create the same quantity of output with fewer inputs. Business increase productivity through all form of entrepreneurial activity and innovation. Countries that are highly industrialized and highly efficient, and those countries, people enjoy a high quality of life, are advanced countries, and they are also called developed countries. So country with highly industrial industry and highly efficient, and the people of those country who enjoy high quality of life, they are called developed country. So people in advanced countries usually receive the finest healthcare and benefit from the best educational system in the world. Most advanced nations also support aid program for helping lower income nations improve their economies and standard of living. An example for developed economies are developed countries: Australia, Canada, Japan, New Zealand, United States, and Western European nations. Classifying the countries, um, emerging market, for example, we say that what is emerging market are newly industrialized market. Countries that have recently increased the portion of their national production and export derived from industrial operation are emerging market, are industrialized countries. These countries have developed some but not all of its capability associated with advanced countries. They have sustained market access, increasing gross domestic product, stable inflation, and strong macroeconomic policies. So countries in this category primarily located in Asia, Central Eastern Europe, and Latin America. Asia's four tiger: Hong Kong, South Korea, Singapore, and Taiwan. Argentina, Brazil, Brunei, Chile, China, Czech Republic, Hungary, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Mexico, Philippines, Poland, Russia, Slovakia, South Africa, Turkey, Thailand, and Vietnam. So these are emerging market, are newly industrialized countries. If we look at this photo, and we can see most economists place Malaysia on the higher end of the scale for emerging economy. Malaysia is the transitioning from its earlier status as a developing nation to an advanced one. The portion of its production and export derived from industrial operation is growing. Today, companies in Malaysia use technology extensively in producing our production activity and also produce many high-tech products. A 5G facial recognition security system is demonstrated in Putrajaya, Malaysia. Now, classifying the countries, the first we talk about advanced country, emerging markets. Now, the next is developing countries or less developed countries. So nations with low quality infrastructure and low personal income are developing countries, and they are also called less developed countries. These countries often rely heavily on one or a few sectors of production, such as agriculture, mineral mining, or oil drilling. They might show potential for becoming emerging market, but typically lack the necessary resources and skills to do so. Developing countries and emerging market as well are sometimes characterized by a high degree of technological dualism. And what is technological dualism? That is use of latest technology in some sector of the economy coupled with the use of outdated technology in others. By contrast, advanced country typically incorporate the latest technological innovations in all manufacturing sectors. So nations that are in developing countries are Africa, the nations in Africa, Middle East, and the least affluent formerly communist nations in Eastern Europe and Asia. Now, national production, basically, these are economics term. So popular indicators of economic development, these are gross domestic product and gross national product. So what's the gross domestic product? Gross domestic product is the value of all goods and services produced by a domestic economy over a 1 year period. GDP is a narrower figure than gross national product in that it excludes a nation's income generated from export, import, and the international operations of its companies. A country GDP per capita is simply its a GDP divided by population to measure the nation's income per person. Marketers often use GDP or GNP per capita figure to determine whether a country population is wealthy enough to be purchasing its product. Uncounted transaction. Many of the nations' transactions do not get counted in their GDP or GNP. Wars frequently occur within nations that were once controlled by colonial powers. If those nations were to prosper, they must break the cycle whereby conflict cause poverty and poverty cause conflict. Another term that need to understand is shadow economy. Shadow economy, all economic activity that have market value but are not formally registered and can be high as around 70% of economy to as low around 7%. On average, it's a presence 35% of GDP in developing countries and emerging market countries, and around 15% in advanced nations. So the question of growth, gross product figures do not tell us whether a nation's economy is growing or shrinking. They are simply a snapshot of 1 year economic output. A nation with moderate GDP or GNP figures attract more investment if its expected growth rate is high. So it need to supplement this data with information on expected future economic performance. Problem of averages. Recall the per capita number that gives an average figure for an entire country. These numbers are helpful in estimating nation's quality of life, but average do not give us a very detailed picture of development. In almost every country, urban area tend to be more developed than have per capita income in the rural area. In most emerging market regions near good harbors or other transportation center tend to be more economically developed than interior region isolated by less efficient means of transportation. Example, Shanghai in China. Pitfalls of comparison. Country comparison using gross domestic figure can be misleading. When comparing gross domestic product or gross product per capita, the currency of each nation being compared must be translated into another currency unit. Usually that is against a dollar amount at official exchange rate. But official exchange rates only tell us how many units of one currency it takes to buy 1 unit of another. They do not tell us what that currency can buy in its home country. Therefore, to understand the true value of accuracy in its home country, we apply the concept purchasing power parity. Let's see what happened when we compare GDP per capita of Mexico to that of United States. Mexico GDP per capita equals $9,849 in US dollar at current exchange rate, and that of United States equals $65,134. If we now adjust Mexico GDP per capita for purchasing power in Mexico, we obtain a figure of $20,944. Comparing $20,944 in Mexico to 65,134 in United States is a better comparison because it adjusts for a lower cost of living in Mexico. In other words, a comparison at current exchange rate say that US GDP per capita is 6.6 times greater than that in Mexico, but comparison at purchasing power parity says that US GDP per capita is 3.1 times greater than that in Mexico. Still a significant disparity indeed, but about half the calculated using current exchange rate. So need to understand the terms purchasing power. What does that mean? It means value of goods and services that can be purchased with 1 unit of country's currency. And purchasing power parity, that is relative ability of two countries' currency to buy the same basket of goods in those two countries. We now know that adjusting figure on national production for purchasing power provide measure for comparison of nations. But we also know that these measures do not capture development's qualitative aspect. Also, the purchasing power parity concept does a fairly decent job for revealing different level of economic development, but it is not a good indicator of a people's total well-being. The United Nations Human Development Index, that measure of the extent to which a government equitably provide its people with a long and healthy life, and education and a decent standard of living. That demonstrate the high national income alone does not guarantee human progress. Map 1 shows how countries rank according to the United Nations Human Development Index, the measure of extent to which government equitably provide its people with a long and healthy life and education and decent standard of living. The map divided nations into 4 categories: very high human development, high human development, medium human development, and low human development. The countries on different human development index are as follow. Very high human development: Alaska, Canada, United States of America, Argentina, Uruguay, Poland, Turkey, Bulgaria, Romania, Belarus, Germany, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Switzerland, France, Italy, Greece, Australia, Belgium, Luxembourg, Latvia, Sweden, Netherlands, Hungary, Spain, Iceland, United Kingdom, Ireland, and Portugal. High human development: Mexico, Haiti, Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Brazil, Paraguay, Peru, Algeria, Ukraine, Moldova, Libya, Tunisia. Medium human development: Morocco, Ghana, Guatemala. Low human development: Mali, Mauritania, Guinea, Liberia. And no data on Iceland and Western Sahara. The countries on different human development index as follow: very high human development: Russian Federation, Kazakhstan, South Korea, Saudi Arabia, Finland, Oman, Australia, and New Zealand. High human development: South Africa, Botswana, Gabon, Indonesia, China, Mongolia, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Sri Lanka. Medium human development: India, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Iraq, Papua New Guinea, Nepal, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Cambodia, Kenya, Zimbabwe, Congo, Democratic Republic, Angola, Zambia, Cameroon, and low human development: Afghanistan, Yemen, Somalia, Ethiopia, South Sudan, Tanzania, Central African Republic, Congo Republic, and no data on North Korea. Political risk. Traditional sources of political risk include matters such as government instability, internal and external conflict, military and religious involvement in politics, corruption, changing laws and regulation, and politicized bureaucracy. Today's political risk can come from almost everywhere. A multinational company might be exposed to political risk indirectly if someone use a smartphone to film worker mistreatment at the foreign factory of subcontractor that supply parts to the multinational. Likelihood of political actions that will be have positively or negatively affect the businesses vary from nation to nation and can affect different type of company in different way. A solid grasp of local values, custom, tradition can help to reduce companies' exposure to political risk. Two broad category of political risk: macro risk, micro risk. Macro risk threaten the activity of all domestic and international company in every industry. And micro risk threatens company only within the particular industry or more narrowly defined groups. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed company to great political risk as political tension rose between some nations. Company then began to reduce exposure to political risk by shortening their supply chain. As opposed to their prior global trend of company outsourcing or offshoring operations, companies began a practice referred to as a near shoring to obtain needed supplies from sources closer to where they are needed. Local conflict can discourage international companies from investing in nation and set back economic development significantly. Conflict may rise from people resentment towards their government over territorial dispute between countries and among ethnic, racial, and religious groups. Open conflict can threaten company physical asset, office, factories, even lives of the employee. So that can rise territorial dispute, Kashmir territory between India and Pakistan. So terrorism include politically motivated violence against individual property, like kidnapping from ransom. So terrorist activity are means of making political statement. Executive of large international companies are often prime target for kidnapper because their employee have deep pockets to pay large ransom. If you look at this photo, business function with a political environment at home and operate within the other nation political environment abroad. And company doing business in other countries encounter political risk just as they do at home. Some of the most volatile times are when political tension boil over the protesters take to streets where they are confronted by police officers, where young people clash with the police in Hong Kong. Can you think of a recent event in your city, state, country, increase political risk for business? So, global manager, your global security checklist. For ways to keep a low profile and stay safe while traveling to the more volatile locations abroad. Getting there, take non-stop flight when possible. Getting around, vary your routines. Keep low profile, do not draw attention to yourself. Guard personal data. Be friendly but cautious when answering questions about yourself, your family, or your employment. Use caution. Be friendly but cautious of a local approach. Use seeking information. No emergency procedure. No local emergency procedure before trouble started. So property seizure, what does that mean? Government sometimes seize the asset of company doing business within their borders. Asset seizure fall into one of three categories. Confiscation, expropriation, nationalization. So these are basically three. So what is confiscation? That is the forced transfer of asset from company to government without compensation. That is confiscation, like Helms-Burton law. Expropriation, forced transfer of asset from company to government with compensation. Example, Argentina action against YPF. Nationalization, government to take over of entire industry like Venezuela. And in the past, it happened in 1970s in Pakistan as well. So confiscation, expropriation, and nationalization can have the short-term effect of saving jobs, boosting currency reserves, or helping the government or the economy in other way. But the long-term result of this form of political risk is usually slower economic development because foreign investors are more reluctant to invest in the country. If you look at this photo, that is Venezuela president shown here. That is Nicolas, became president in 2013 after the death of Hugo and was re-elected in 2018. So Hugo Chavez initiated a socialist revolution by confiscating over 1,000 farms and companies in Venezuela. Kimberly-Clark, Chemex, and Kellogg's are among multinationals that lost assets there. Venezuela economy has suffered severely since then. Maduro's government recently amended its policy. It allows private firms to manage the asset of certain business and then takes a cut of profit. Why does government confiscating assets seems to always fail? Now, government policies. One policy that government use in international business restrict ownership to domestic company only are limited power by foreign firms to minority stake. China used this type of policy to restrict foreign investor to minority position with domestic joint venture partner, and PepsiCo's ownership of local company was restricted to 49% when it first entered in India. Economic development can be impeded if companies withhold investment from a nation because of such policies. Laws stipulating that a specific amount of a good or services be supplied by producer in the domestic market called local content requirements. These requirements can force companies to use locally available raw material, procure parts from local supplier, employ a minimum number of local workers. They ensure that international companies foster local business activity and help ease regional or national unemployment. They also help government maintain some degree of control over national companies without resorting to extreme measures such as confiscation and expropriation. These efforts can help drive the economic development of a nation when used skillfully, or slow development if used carelessly. Local content requirement can possibly jeopardize an international firm's long-term survival. International company monitor and attempt to predict political changes that can negatively affect their activities. And they be proactive or developing situational awareness. When an international business opportunity arises in an environment plagued by extremely high risk, simply not investing in a location may be the wisest course of action. Yet when a risk is moderate and the local market is attractive, international companies find a way to manage political risk. In this way, private sector investment from foreign companies help advance a nation's economy and possibly even help lower political risk over the time. International company monitor Okay, so now adaptation. Adaptation means incorporating risk into business strategy. Often with the help of local official, company can incorporate risk in 4 ways: partnership, localization, development assistance, insurance. So what does mean partnership? The first, partnership help companies leverage expansion plan. They can be informal arrangement or include joint ventures, strategic alliance, and cross-holding of company stock. Localization entails modifying operation, the product mix, or some other business element, even the company name, to suit local taste and culture. Development assistance allows an international business to assist the host country or region in improving the quality of life for the locals. Insurance against political risk can be essential to companies entering a risky business environment. Informal gathering. International firms attempt to gather information that will help them predict and manage the political risk. There are two sources that companies use to conduct the accurate political risk forecasting. Current employees who have worked in country long enough to gain insight into local culture and politics, and agencies specialized in providing political risk services. So a good source of information is current employees who have worked in a country long enough to gain insight into local culture. This includes individuals who formerly had decision-making authority while on the international assignment and had contact with the local politicians and other officials. Yet it is important that an employee's international experience be recent, because political power in a nation can shift rapidly and dramatically. And agencies specialized in providing political risk services includes bank, political consultant, new publications, and risk assessment services. Political influence is basically mostly based on lobbyists. The lobbyists meet with local public officials to influence their position on issues relevant to the company. Lobbyists also work to conceive local official that a company benefit economic development, sustainability effort, workforce skills, and so on. In addition, building a relationship with external stakeholder diplomacy in the local community can help a company avoid and manage a crisis brought on by political risk. Basically, what is the goal? Goal is to get favorable legislation enacted and unfavorable legislation rejected. Relations among countries can influence the political economy of nations and the peace of economic development. Favorable and strong political relationship foster stable business environment. Favorable political relation among countries expand business opportunities, lower the risk, and promote economic development. So to generate stable business environment, some countries have turned to be multilateral agreement. What's that? Those multilateral agreements are treaties concluded among several nations, each of whom agree to abide by treaty terms even if tension develop. If you look on this photograph, former Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, meets with French President Emmanuel Macron. An important function of national government official is the cultivation and nurturing of international relations. Political leaders have compared this diplomatic task to gardening, cultivation, and nurturing relations in today's allows the future enjoyment of the fruits of that labor, including peace, prosperity, and cooperation. The United Nations was formed after the Second World War to provide leadership in fostering peace and stability around the world. The United Nations and its many agencies provide food and medical supplies, educational supplies and training, and financial resources to poorer member nations. The United Nations receive its funds from member countries based primarily on gross national product. Practically all nations in the world are UN member, except for several small countries and territories that have observer status. So there are 6 main bodies: General Assembly, Security Council, Economic and Social Council, UN Conference on Trade and Development, the Trusteeship Council, the International Court of Justice, and Secretariat. Countries with recently planned economies have been remarking themselves in the image of stronger market economy. This process, called economic transition, involve changing in nations' fundamental economic organizations and creating entirely new free market institutions. The process typically involves several key reform measures to promote economic development. What are those key reforms? Stabilizing the economy, reducing budget deficit, and expanding credit availability, allowing price to reflect supply and demand, legalizing private business, selling state-owned company, and supporting property rights, reducing barriers to trade and investment, and allowing currency convertibility, encouraging innovations through investment and entrepreneurship. Transition obstacles, key obstacles for countries in transaction. There are several key obstacles for countries in transaction. First is a lack of managerial expertise. In central planning, there was a little need for production, distribution, and marketing strategy or for trained individuals to devise them. Recent years are seeing higher quality management in transition countries because of improved education opportunity to study and work abroad and changes in work habits. Second is a capital shortage. Economic transition and development are expensive and requires funding to develop a telecommunications and infrastructure system, to create financial institution, and to educate people in market economies. Third are cultural differences. Economic transition and development cause cultural change and replace dependence on government with greater emphasis on individual. Cuts are often needed in welfare, unemployment benefit, and guaranteed government jobs. Economic transition in China. China began its experiment with central planning in 1949 after the communist defeat nationalists in long civil war. From 1949 until reforms were initiated in the late 1970s, China had a unique economic system. Agricultural production was organized into groups of people who formed production brigades and production units. In 1979, China initiated agriculture reforms that strengthened work incentive in this sector. At about the same time, township and village enterprise began to operate. The government initially regarded township and village enterprises as illegal and unrelated to the official sanctioned communes. but they were legalized in 1984 and helped by law additional groundwork for market economy. Today, China leaders describe its economic philosophy as a socialism with Chinese characteristic, and skyscraper dominate the Shanghai and Beijing cityscapes. The country's immense population, rising income, and expanding opportunity attract huge sum of investment. And China's Belt and Road Initiative is destiny to connect more than 70 countries across Asia, Europe, and Africa into new Silk Road of railway, highways, and ports. China Belt and Road Initiative assists developing and emerging nations in constructing seaports, railways, bridges, dams, and other infrastructure. The Padma Bridge in Bangladesh will ease the movement of trade along the Asian Highway and Trans-Asian Railway. China has at least several goals for Belt and Road Initiative. It aims to secure itself reliable trade routes across Asia and into Africa, stimulate the economies of its central provinces, and increase its economic and political power in those regions. What are the pros and cons might country experience by participating in BRI, Belt and Road Initiatives? Economic transition in China. If there is one trait that all private company need in China, it is patience. Ideological differences remain between the private sector and China Communist Party. Karl Marx once summed up communism as the abolition of private property, and the name of Chinese Communist Party literally means common property party. But today, private property is an accepted concept, and the government strongly encourages Chinese company to invest in innovation. Leading Chinese multinational now rank among the world most frequent applicants for patents. A personal touch is the necessary ingredient for a foreign company to achieve success in China. Initially, and in line with the communist ideology, non-Chinese companies were restricted from participating in China's economy. But today, outsiders enjoy ever greater opportunity to create joint venture with local partner. To learn more about the need for personal relationship, Guanxi in China. Personal relationship or Guanxi in China. See this chapter cultural insight feature guidelines for the good Guanxi. Now, for guidelines for good Guanxi, that contacts versus contacts. Face-to-face communication and personal relationship take priority over written contracts. Player before business. Leave the sale pitch on the back burner and follow the lead of Chinese host. Never turn down an invitation to attend a Chinese executive family event. Cultural sensitivity. China is not a single market, but many different regional markets with different culture and different languages. Economic transition in China. China leadership must deal with increasingly rapid economic and social change. Political and social problem pose threat to China's future economic performance. Another key issue is reunification of Greater China. China's challenges, rapid economic and social change, political and social problem, unemployment and migrant labor, increased democratic reforms not supported by the government, limiting the power of a nation's biggest firms, reunification of Greater China, Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan. Now, economic transition, Russia. Russia experience with communism began in 1970. For the next 75 years, factories, distribution, and all other facets of operation, including the prices of labor, capital, and products, were controlled by Russian government. In 1980s, the former Soviet Union entered a new era of freedom of thought, freedom of expression, and economic restructuring. Transition away from government ownership and central planning was challenging, except for politicians, bureaucrats, and wealthy business people called oligarchs in Russia. Ordinary people had difficulty maintaining their standard of living and affording many basic needs or basic items. If you look on this photo, that is Rosneft is one of the Russia's largest independent gas producer. The company oil refinery is located in the Kras Krasnodar region on the shore of the Black Sea. The company core activity include oil prospecting and exploration, oil and gas production, developing offshore oil field project, and oil and gas refining. Oil is the main export for Russia in an average year. Oil and petroleum products account for between 45 and 50% of the value of Russia total export. So, as in so many other transition economy, Russia must continue to foster managerial talent. Years of central planning delayed the development of managerial skill needed in the market-based economy. Political instability, especially in the form of intensified nationalist sentiment, is another potential threat to the progress. Strong ethic and nationalist sentiment in the region can cause misunderstanding to spiral out of control quickly. Russia unstable investment climate is another concern among international business. Tense uneasiness between Russia government and its business community system from the government's attack on business owners who disagree with the official policy and on firm that it wants to control.